a quilt really fast, so we're gonna make a quilt from start to finish in a day. Are you ready? Hello everybody, my name is Jenna and today we're making a quilt from start to finish in less than a day. If you're like me, I love to gift quilts to people, but sometimes I just need a quick quilt that will look so beautiful to be able to gift to someone quickly. My favorite way to make a quilt quickly is by using pre-cut fabric, and so today we are going to make a super easy, beginner-friendly layer cake quilt, and all you need is one layer cake, your backing, binding, and batting, and in the end, you'll have a beautiful quilt in less than a day. Let's start by cutting our layer cake, and look at all of these beautiful fabrics. Ooh, they are just so cute. I chose a winter fabric because yes, it is technically November, but I like to make my winter quilts a little bit early. We're gonna start by cutting this entire layer cake the exact same way, and I like to cut no more than 4 pieces of fabric at a time. I notice that when I cut more than that, my fabric tends to shift on me just a little bit and your cuts won't be as accurate. So we're just gonna start here, and I just need to press this really fast because the corners are coming up. I'm gonna start by making 2 cuts. So I'm gonna measure 4 inches from the side, and I wanna make sure that my 10-inch line is lined up against the bottom and my 4-inch line is lined up against the side to make sure everything is nice and square. Then I'm gonna make 1 cut. We're gonna do the same thing on the bottom. So I'm gonna come up from the bottom and I'm gonna measure 4 inches. And I wanna just make sure my 10-inch mark is lined up here and my 4-inch mark is lined up here. And I can go and cut from the opposite side. And now we have our 4 perfect blocks. We have a 6-inch square, a 4-inch square, and then 2 6x4-inch pieces. And then I am just gonna separate all of these guys out and continue this with the entire pack. Just making those 2 cuts. And when it comes to using a rotary cutter and ruler, I absolutely love the True Cut system because the rulers have a ledge on them, and then all of the rotary cutters come with a guide that hooks on that edge and keeps it from moving. So then I don't get any cuts that are wonky because my ruler went the wrong direction. So with this, I can just hook on my guide and go straight through. And there are no wonky cuts. How cool is that? All of my pieces are cut. Our next step is to separate all of our colors into light and dark values. All value is the lightness and darkness of a color. And when you're looking at something with your naked eye, you can see, oh, obviously this pile is a lot lighter than this pile of fabric. But with this fabric, if we're looking at these 2 next to each other, if I turn down all of the color and I'm just looking at these in black and white, you can see that this one is a little bit darker in value, but they are super similar values. But maybe if I look at it with this fabric, this one's definitely a little lighter than this one. So maybe that's a little bit more dramatic here. Or if we're going to this pile, this fabric and this fabric have very similar values. What makes this one appear a little bit darker is the cross hatching on the fabric. So I'm gonna separate these into 2 piles based on value, and I need 21 light fabrics and 21 dark fabrics. These guys are my middle group, so I'm gonna figure out which pile I wanna put them in. The way I'm gonna divide this out is I'm just looking at what has more patterns, and then I'll separate it out by that. All of our pieces are organized into light and dark, and now we're gonna do 2 different styles of blocks. And for our first block, or what I'll call block A, we are gonna do the darker values diagonal with each other, being the 6-inch and 4-inch square. And then we're gonna make our rectangles our lighter values. So I'm just gonna divide this in half. And now I have 1 block here. And my favorite way to kind of mix up fabrics, especially when I don't wanna go through here and say, oh, does this and this go together right now? Because that's a lot of brain power. I'll randomly cut my stack right down the middle and do that to all of my stacks. And then I'll go and look and I'll say, oh, these 2 are the same pattern. Maybe I'll do that one later. And maybe I'll add that block right there. Or I'll add this block right here. So it just makes things a little bit easier. But this will be our first pair of blocks. And for block B, we're gonna do the opposite, where our 6-inch and 4-inch squares are our lighter fabric, and then our rectangles are our darker fabric. I'll go ahead and just kind of move things around a little bit until I like the way it looks. And now I can take this over to my machine and sew them super easy. And to make these blocks, we're just gonna sew these two together first using a 1/4-inch seam, then these two, and we'll sew them together like this. And our finished block size is gonna be 9.5 inches. When it comes to pressing these blocks, I recommend pressing to the dark side the entire time and staying consistent with that so that it's easier to nest your seams. And so I've pressed to the dark for both this piece and this piece. And now I can fold these on top. I can nest my seams nicely. When it comes to pressing this final long seam, you can press it open, you can press it to the side, whatever you prefer, but this is one cool way that I've learned to press that will alternate the direction my seams are going so I can nest my seams later on. And so this is where my seam is, and all I'm gonna do is kind of pull the thread apart right there so that it unlocks, and then I can push both my seams down, and they'll be going towards the light side, and that's okay for me. But if I consistently do this with all of my seams, anytime I go to put blocks together, I can nest my seams, which I love because that helps me get more perfect points. This is what your final block is gonna look like. And our last step is to make sure it is 9.5 inches squared. And it's practically square, but I'm just gonna do a nice little trim around the edges. And in the end, I should have 21 blocks that look like this with the light values that are the squares and the dark values the rectangles, and then I should have 21 blocks the opposite where the dark values are the squares and the light values are the rectangles. Then we can go ahead and sew it together. Once all of your blocks are sewn together, you have 42 9.5-inch squares that you can put in a 6x7 grid to make a beautiful quilt, and you can orient them any way you want to. And for my version of this quilt, I'm going to take my blocks and I'm going to start with my first row, and my first row is going to be dark, light, dark, light, dark, and then when I go to my next row, I want it to be light, dark, light, dark, light. And so what that does is it just alternates the values and places them evenly throughout the quilt, and I can do that all the way down. Then when it comes to the orientation, I want to turn my blocks so that all of the larger 6-inch square parts are touching each other and all of the smaller 4-inch squares are touching each other, so that it kind of looks like a plaidish design. And then when you go to sew them together, you're going to start with your first row. So all of your blocks together, create row 1, repeat that with the rest of the rows. Then you can sew all of your rows together to create your beautiful quilt. And here's my final quilt top, and it took me around 2 hours to finish, and I think I could get it down to maybe 1 hour and 45 minutes if I hurry really fast, but I call that pretty quick. But this video is not make a quilt top in a day, it is make a quilt from start to finish in a day. So I gotta quilt this. So I am gonna use my Little Rebel and my Cutie frame because it is super easy for the Little Rebel to switch from sewing to quilting mode. And the Cutie is like portable and nice and easy, so I don't need a lot of space for it. And before I load my Cutie frame, I have got to prep my quilt. So I have put my batting and my backing together, and now I just gotta put my top on it. I just want to make sure there is at least 4 or 5 inches of backing fabric hanging all the way around. And then I'm just going to smooth all of this out as I go. And now my quilt sandwich is all prepped and I'm ready to load the Cutie frame. I want you to guess in the comments how long it's going to take me to quilt this. And I'll let you know if you're right or wrong at the end. Okay, let's load this. end of the day and this quilt is finished, and we decided to change the set to match the winter vibes of this quilt and all of the cute little snowman fabric and all the snowflakes. I love how it turned out. This quilt was so easy to make, and I feel like the time really flew by. To piece the top, it took around 2 to 2.5 hours. To quilt it using my cutie and little rebel, and then to put on the binding, it took 30-ish minutes. And so I have a finished quilt now, and it's been 4 to 5 hours, 4 to 6 hours, somewhere between there. If you also want to make this fun, fast, and easy quilt for yourself or a gift for somebody this holiday season, the link is for free in the description below. I wrote the pattern myself, so I know it's good. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Remember to like and subscribe for more fun quilting content, and I'll see you next time on Jenna Tries.